Some of you may know that I celebrated a birthday recently. August 16th, I turned 67. That seems old to me, but now that I'm 67, it don't seem that old. On most of my birthdays, you spend a little time reflecting on your life. This year was no different. Some of you that are my Facebook friends saw pictures of me with my grandchildren, and I was blessed to be able to spend the day with them. We went to the zoo and Chuck E. Cheese for my 67th birthday. Now, if that's not young at heart, I don't know what is. My father was a Baptist minister. On the night that my mother went into labor, my dad was preaching at a revival. Mom's encouraged him to go ahead and do his revival meeting, and she could handle giving birth by herself. I did have 4 older sisters. Mom went to the hospital. I was born, but something else happened that night. A young man named the last name of Dickerson accepted Christ as his Savior, and it was one of my dad's lifelong friends. And one of my precious mementos of my father is the Bible he used that night in that revival service. I had this illusion for years that I got a special favor from God because of that event, that I was born without my father being there, but a soul was saved. To tell you, I grew up being a pastor's son. If you know any pastor's sons, give them a little break sometimes. It's like living in a fishbowl. For me back then, Baptist pastors didn't stay at churches very long. 3 years, 36 months, you could almost mark a calendar from the day that we arrived somewhere to the day that we would leave. That was very hard on me. Some of you know I'm a quiet guy, and I was very bashful. And it took me about 3 years to warm up, so by the time I felt comfortable at one location, we'd moved to another. Life went on like this till I was about in middle school. And my dad come into my room, and you got to understand, my dad was very busy with his work, and he and I were not really all that close, and we never had deep conversations. He come in and asked me that particular day, and it was running through my mind, what have I done for this? Dad never comes in here. And he asked me if I thought God was calling me to be a minister. That just floored me. And I said, well, there's no way, Dad. And but that got me thinking. I'd been a Christian for years. My family, it was like learning to walk, becoming a Christian. It was such a part of our life. And I knew it was real because I knew the joy that I had the day that I accepted Christ. Planting that seed, Satan took that seed, that thought, and from that point on in my life, the thought of becoming a minister was frightening to me. I can look back on that moment in my life as a mile marker, and I started turning away from God at middle school. I didn't live a bad life, but I was just afraid that I would be a minister. So I went on, we went through high school. I worked at a service station in Madisonville, and across the street a young lady was living there, and she'd come get pop out of the pop machine from our service station. Small bottle of Cokes. Her dad said that they tasted better. I thought she was coming over to see me. But anyway, I met Becky, and those of you know her, she has to be good-natured to live with me. But at age 17 and 18, we were married. That's one of the best things that happened in my life. She has testified in recent years that she had prayed for God to send her a husband. That's a high standard for a man to live up to. And I'm sure that I gave her many days to ponder whether I was the true answer to her prayers or not. But I was able to go to work in the mining industry in the early 70s until I reached the age 24 when my knee started hurting me. And I stepped in a hole in the ground, and it really hurt. and I found out that I had cancer in my knee. Most cancers you think of as tumors that grow. This tumor dissolved. It was dissolving the bone in my femur. I'd been to a doctor in Madisonville, and he told me that I'd never work in the coal mines again. They might have to fuse my legs stiff. I had a sister that worked in Louisville, and she got me in to see Dr. Harkis, which taught orthopedics at Louisville School. On that road to Louisville, knowing what I knew, you've heard the term, I don't like this term, but this was true, come to Jesus meeting. God made arrangements for me to be alone with Him. I realized you didn't make deals with God. So my commitment to Him was that no matter how this turned out, my path was going to be toward Him, not away from Him. Doors started to open, and obviously you guys see me walking around. I got 2 legs. Some of you know that I've run in 5Ks, that I exercise. I'm still supposed to be wearing a brace. God had other plans for me. He opened the doors for me to go back to college, got an engineering degree, but He also opened the doors for me and Becky to have a better life. You know, Christ come to earth for us to have an abundant life, but we have to grasp it. He's not going to break our door down to give it to us. It reminds me of the story of the woman that had spent all of her money on an illness that was incurable. And she was in a crowd, and she reached out and touched Christ's garment and was healed. She had to reach out. Sometimes we have different points when we have to reach out. At that point, Christ knew that someone had touched Him, and He is asking, who touched me? And the disciple says, everybody's touching you. You're in a crowd. But this one lady, she stepped up timidly and said it was me. Christ said to her, your faith has healed you. At the same time, if you recall that story, Jairus had met Christ as he got off the boat and said, come to my house, my daughter is dying. And at that time, word was sent to him, don't bother the master any longer, your daughter is dead. You know what Christ said to Jairus? He said, it's in Mark 5:36, he says, don't be afraid, just have faith. It speaks volumes to me. There's been a lot of things in my life that I've never understood. Y'all may be familiar with the serenity prayer. It's God grant me the strength to change the things I can change and to accept the things I cannot. But the most important part of that prayer is God grant me the wisdom to know the difference between the two. There's so many things in this world today that are confusing to me, but I got the promise of God that He can work through these things. Even family things that I deal with on a daily basis. You know I have a heart for Haiti, and seeing the one thing after another occurring in Haiti, that's a heartbreaking situation. But I hang my hat on what Jesus said to Jairus that day. Don't be afraid, have faith. And if I can leave you with anything today is don't be afraid, have faith.